Hello, everyone. Welcome to this week's episode of Commission Breath. Brandon Love here with Tom Moffat. And there's about 90 days left in 2024. So today we are going to do a dive into how you should assess where you're at, what you should do to finish the year strong, and how to plan to have a rock solid start to 2025. So thanks for joining us today. Tom and I have been burning the candle at both ends with our mortgage business, the brokerage, and just getting a lot of things going that way. And we came into the recording booths today and we were like, shit, we don't really have a good commission breath idea. Usually we're so far planned in advance with this. And I was like, all right, well, how many days are left in the year? Like, we should do a revisit on this. And yeah, so that's why we came to it. So I think we're going to touch on some golden nuggets and we're going to slowly uncover them for you.
Yeah, we were sitting here. What time is it now? I mean, it's been about 36 minutes of you and I sitting here, literally thinking of an idea to record today. But I'm glad we thought of something. I think this one's actually going to be very helpful for listeners because I like to set the bar for not just this month or the next month, but going into the new year. And I know you shouldn't always think about in the future and you should be present, but at the same time, you do want to make sure you fill the pipe and your business is healthy going forward. I think I'm so focused on the future that I texted a realtor partner today and I mentioned something about like, oh, how's your Q4 going today? And I realized we're not even in Q4 yet, which is pretty funny. But nonetheless, I think like now is a great time to start planning for, okay, like what do you need to do right now to get everything going, fill the pipe, assess your business, and figure out what needs to be reviewed and what needs to be edited, put more gas on the fire for that specific topic. So I think like for this episode, we're going to start out by talking about like the different things you and I, Brandon, assess in our business to see what we need to focus on going forward.
Yeah, for sure. Number one is just doing that assessment. So write down where you're at, everything you've done this year, everything that's worked, everything that hasn't had the same impact you thought. I think in doing that, also revisit some of the non-negotiables you made and say, okay, which ones of these did I actually negotiate on? I said I was going to go to the gym 3 times a week. Did I go to the gym 3 times a week, or did I go one time one week, 3 times the next? Or did I do my calls every day, or did I batch calls? And just kind of figure out how you did there. It's not to criticize yourself. Quite often it just points out a personality. Maybe you work in like strategic sprints versus a daily set of things each day. That's totally fine. But figure out what works for you so that going into 2025 you can work that way.
Yeah, I think that's a great point because like there's no hard set rule on having a daily non-negotiable. It's best practice to have something that you do every single day, but some non-negotiables might not fall into a daily routine. I found myself figuring that out because I've edited my non-negotiables so many times throughout the years, and you are going to do that in your business. You're going to tailor it to whatever you're doing next with your lead gen. Like I used to do daily DMs, and that didn't last very long, man. I hated doing them. I don't know why. It was just something that I just hate being on social media, like always on it. And I think I found myself doing that. So I quickly removed that. Kind of have to tailor it to what your vibe and what you're feeling. And you don't have to be miserable doing your daily non negotiables, but it has to be effective at the same time.
Exactly. You got to play to your personality and just like the seasonality of life. Like if you're doing 25 realtor calls a day and you're trying to call people right after Christmas, Boxing Day kind of thing, you're going to be a guy who's annoying people, not who's impressing them with your hustle. But like also in the same token, like figure out what kind of life you want and lifestyle design there. So if you want to have a business where you're doing trips with your family, you're buying properties, you're doing these things, you're going to have to achieve a certain amount. And that means accepting a certain level of shit, for lack of a better term. So putting up with things you don't enjoy doing to make sure you can get to that point. So building backwards is great, like inverting to see that. But you can also invert on this past year and say, okay, I did X. It kind of worked or it didn't work at all. And how do I build now going forward?
Yeah, and I'll actually give an example of one thing that I've tweaked from I guess you can call it a non-negotiable, but it's definitely not a daily non-negotiable. Essentially, in my master tracker, so like my leads and mortgage file spreadsheet, I've got a section for checkboxes, like to-dos for every file. So if it's a purchase file, I have two tasks that are outbound to the listing realtor. So the first one goes out when it's a COF and you wrapped up the COF and the deal is now firm. That's when I'll do my first reach out to the listing realtor, and it's text. Both of them are texts. The second one is on closing date, congratulating them. And I wasn't doing that consistently before, maybe because it wasn't on my daily non-negotiables, but now that it's in my tracker system, I've been so consistent with it. So I think you need to find a way to make sure that it's present in front of you on a either daily, weekly, whatever that cadence is. So that way you stay on track of it.
Yeah, I think you identify the holes in the boat and then you say, okay, how do I fill this? And you and I do this both on our own and for each other quite a bit. You'll be like, hey, I just did all these email templates. And when I go into your email template folder, there's like nothing there. And I'm like, yeah, oh fuck, I just typed it. So I think like you point out flaws and then I implement it. And then like yesterday, I was in a hurry to go get my daughter for something and I had to send a bunch of emails and I just went through and I used all the templates. I'm like, yeah, it's so much better. You have to realize and recognize these flaws. And like part of what I'm recognizing with myself is like giving up certain responsibilities and delegation and stuff like that is something this year we've really had to learn to do with growing all these different channels and stuff like that. And it's something I'll have to continually improve on, but recognizing that and saying, okay, I'm going to focus on what can I delegate is just a question for each thing I have now, and doing that for the duration of this year, going into next year, I'm going to be such a better delegator because of that.
Yeah, I find myself having to remind myself to delegate as well. It's a habit I think you have to build. One recent one for me was I was spending a lot of time on the main Tango website. Eventually, I'm like, man, why am I doing this? Like, we need to outsource this. And luckily, at the time, I connected with Lacey, our social media specialist with Tango, and she's doing a way better job and a lot faster than what I was doing. But I was like, oh, this is what delegating feels like.
Yeah, yeah, I know you sent that off, and I was like, "That's beautiful." Like for me, I was sitting there and I was like going through a client's bank statements and down payment. I'm like, "Yeah, that's a job that we
Diana.
have for Diana, who's been
Yeah.
working with us for over a year, and it's fantastic." And I'm like, "Why am I doing this?" But you just sometimes fall into bad habits, and I think a lot of it's because you get to a certain point by being a solo operator and then you have to bring more people on to continue building. But a lot of those habits, your muscle memory goes back to sometimes deferring to that bad habit. And that definitely happens to me for sure. So that's like a hole in the boat that I'm going to focus on changing this year and going forward for sure. Is there anything on your side that you've kind of identified in the assessment that you feel like you really need to work on?
Yeah, I was just doing this, I think it was a couple days ago. I wasn't doing like an actual official assessment. I just realized it at the time was one of my top producing realtor partners is exiting the business. She's retiring. So that's going to be a big hole in my business from a leads perspective. So I know I got to fill that. So I can either A, keep increasing the amount of meetings I have with FAs, which I'm going to continue to do that. I think I'm going to stop at 10, by the way, 10 meetings. Or I do another, say, 1 to 3 high quality realtor meetings with a mutual connection. Like whether it's me reaching out to some of my realtor partners and having them introduce me to their friends, I think I might do that. But I think we were chatting before this and you're like, no, man, you should probably just like cut out growing the list for realtors and just keep continuing doing what you're doing with the FAs and go a bit deeper on that. So I think I'm going to go that route.
Yeah, or with the realtors too, I would say the person who's exiting, talk to them and then say, "Hey, if a client comes to you now, who's the person that you're going to refer to?" And then get the intro there. That's a perfect handoff for you to set that up. And do a few of those. Like get maybe there's going to be 3 names on our list because realtors love the list of 3. Get established there, and then that
Yeah.
sets a good foundation for you. I told Tom to go FAs and focus on Tango, but
Oh, yeah, true. That's right. Yeah. And then my ego got in the way. It's like, oh, but I really wanted to hit this certain number this year for my volume. And then you're like, doesn't matter, man. Doesn't matter. Things are going
yeah.
well. So,
Yeah, exactly. At the end of the day, we have to constantly remind ourselves we're like anyone. Sometimes ego and greed comes into the picture, and we have to remind
oh, yeah,
ourselves like
absolutely, man.
what we want to build. We have a vision of it. We share that vision. It's very dialed in, and so we have to constantly be like, "Hey, this isn't important. Let's focus on the things that matter."
Yeah. I think if like one of us were on our own doing it, we would definitely fall into that trap. Like I feel like we always remind each other of that. It's easier to recognize it on someone else than it is yourself.
100%. It totally is. And I know that if I was on my own, I would just be like, no, yeah, I skipped all the family thing this week, but I made like 3 million more in volume,
Yeah.
whatever. You'd be like, cool. This guy's a loser.
What about you? Do you have any holes in your boat you identified?
I think delegating is the big one. I think I missed a few opportunities with getting referrals from past clients. Like I do get a decent amount of them, but I didn't put enough in my client journey templated wise, like I was talking about there. So building out that template and working on that is going to be something I'm going to focus on just to not let opportunities fall through the cracks. And like I do a lot of texting, calling, like asking that way, but I don't often throw myself the easy wins outside of Google reviews and stuff like that. So I think I'm going to implement more of that to catch some of the stuff because inevitably we get busy and then, certain things start to fall off. So
Do you know how you're going to implement that through the client journey? Is the idea to get more referrals from the client journey or to get more Google reviews?
both. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to log into the experts email and I'm going to copy all the work you did. And then that's how I'm going to do it.
Well, it's there for a reason, buddy. I mean, if it means more business for both of us, get right on it. Speaking of client journey, I spent a lot of time on it this past month. I get into these like zones of like super high concentration of like one thing that I really want to do. Like client journey was a theme, financial advisors were a theme, and they were kind of intertwined actually, because a lot of what I'm doing with the client journey is to supplement the amount of leads I get from financial advisors. And I have these, like, as Hormozy calls them, seasons of like high concentration of one thing or the other. I don't know if it's like my obsessive nature with some things, but anyways, the client journey, I've updated it too. So like if you go back to the Yes Word templates, you'll see it in there. And the idea is to get more leads for not just us, but for other wealth partners to then feed to them to get more referrals from them. So we'll definitely have another episode going a bit deeper on that and some of the changes we've made.
For sure. Yeah, you have seasons of like just going really deep on processes. And I'm like, all right, well, just go for it. Just have fun. And then I'll circle back and copy what you do if I like it.
Yeah, sometimes you're like, "Ah, this is a little too much." Like, there's a template that I tweaked, and you're like, "Diana, don't fucking send this thing."
I wish I could share that template with everyone because it had a lot in it. I bet you if we shared it, there would be a split view of like everyone on your side who's like, this is amazing. And then people on my side who are like, yeah, holy crap, I would never send that out.
Yeah. Was it the all conditions met template? Automatically booking them for the anniversary call? Was it that one?
There was like that. There was like insurance was in there,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
financial advisor, being your long term wealth. I was just like, whoa, this guy really wants to be a part of my life forever. Uh,
That's the vibe you got, eh? Well, maybe we gotta share the wealth and showcase it, get some votes on it. Let us know. Send us a DM.
if you guys want to see it, we'll share it. One of 100 templates in there that Tom sends out. So that does kind of lead into the last point we wanted to touch on, though, which is thinking about the lifetime value of your actions. And a lot of the work that you do with like those processes, it takes a lot of time and hours and sending them out and then having people come back and critique them or me just poo poo on them. And then you got to go back and revisit. But once that's implemented, it's part of the system and it generates leads for you. It generates referrals, reviews, referrals for your partners, and reviews for yourself. So it adds a lot of value. And I think a lot of the focus here is on identifying things and putting things in that are going to impact you long term. You're unlikely to really save 2024 from a numbers perspective at this point. Like, you might have a few quick closes, but you find the deals are going to have a 60, 90-day close on them. You're probably closing in 2025. So from a calendar year, not going to have a big impact on your numbers, but you can have a dramatic impact on your business and your life by implementing some of this stuff.
Well, yeah, and speak about like what I always look for is low effort, high leverage. And one thing I just did recently that I'm loving, if anyone uses Zapier, it's a really easy program to connect different softwares together, and it's a form of automation. And if you've listened to the podcast long enough, we're not huge automation guys, but there is a time and place for some of it. And this one automation that I put in place is whenever someone submits an application through Finmo, it zaps 4, 1, 2, and three's information into my iPhone for a contact. And with that, I also have the birthday in there. So on my Google Calendar, you can see the client's birthday in there. And I love it because now I'm on the text game, Brandon. You got me on the text game now. So I've had this with a couple clients through the client journey where they're shopping for homes and whether they're in the application phase or whatever. And I've texted him saying happy birthday. And like so far it's been great. Like it's just it feels a bit stickier and now I'm on the text game. So I'm loving it.
I love that you have implemented the texting strategy. I think it's going to be a big high value return for you there. That's an idea here, but you shared a concept about finding problems in your business. I think you stole from Hormozy, but why don't you touch on it here for the listeners?
Yeah, it was a video I watched recently. I'd probably gonna botch how his framework was for it, but essentially he was saying like in your business you have problems and you have ideas. You're far better off focusing on the problems in your business versus focusing on the new idea. And it does like tie into the whole shiny object, but I wouldn't even really paint the ideas column in the shiny object fashion because like some ideas is something that you can do to improve your business and have like an added component to it that you know isn't shiny object because you've seen others do it and it's increased their business or whatever. But if you solve the problems before adding that extra component to your business, you're far better off. You're going to have a higher result on the problem versus the ideas. So, if I were to give an example on that, let's just say client journey was just disastrous. I wasn't focusing any time on it instead of focusing on a new lead gen aspect of like, hey, now I'm going to branch out to financial advisors now. Instead of doing that, focus on the client journey first to have that better experience for the clients going through it. And maybe weave in different ways to showcase it to your referral partners that are already referring you business. You're probably going to have a better output on that versus focusing on that new thing.
Yeah, 100%. I think you can kind of look at the foundation of anyone's mortgage business. And obviously, there's like referral partners and relationships. There's a layer of once you get those relationships, like your discovery call and your client journey onwards. And I think if you can get those two things right, you can make up for not knowing like all the facts about underwriting, not knowing how to place a super niche mortgage. Like you can get away with having those kind of like gaps in knowledge while you figure them out just by focusing on a few of those foundational skills.
Yeah, absolutely. And that goes into the idea of like it's who you know, not what you know. And going to that example, if you have a couple of mortgage brokers that you know are focusing on, I don't know, commercial, reverse mortgages, I'd rather know them than try to master that new thing. And if the time comes where I need that, then I can either co-broker it, pass it off, or I can just tap into their knowledge and try to figure it out on my own. I probably wouldn't go with the latter. I'd probably rather just co-broker it.
Yeah, just co-broker it, hand it off, and focus on the next
Yeah,
deal.
exactly.
Beautiful. All right, going in, final point here, I think is really important to finish this year and go into next year strong is to pick something that can kind of change your mindset a little bit. I think a lot of people, we've already touched on this so many times in the podcast, really let themselves get beat down this year. And I don't think we're at the end of the battle yet. The banks are going to continue to be competitive, knowing sort of the monolines are going to have access to some of those larger loans, be more competitive in that space coming in December. So I think a lot of the competition is going to ramp up for a bit and a lot of people will get discouraged by this. So I think like figure out sort of what wipes the slate clean for you, what resets things, and put in that into your practice. And when you feel it, recognize it and do something to change your scenery up, book a day off, go to the spa, whatever it is you have to do for you, implement that now so that you're set up for success.
Love it, man. You're always the key mindset guy. Get me fired up. Yeah, and one thing I'll say to that is motivation doesn't last forever, but the habits you install do.
Beautiful. All right. Thank you, everyone. Have a great week, and we'll see you next time.